She dismissed me with a smirk, thinking I was just another admin with a long title and no teeth. 48 hours later, every international shipment froze, and the Department of Commerce wasn't asking. They were demanding. It started with a firma I wasn't supposed to see. That morning, the office buzzed with a tension I couldn't quite place. Not the usual Monday sluggishness, but a silent electricity that made people avoid eye contact. Emails were shorter. Doorways closed faster. Even the intern, who usually greeted me with a nervous, "Hey, Ms. Lane," gave a quick nod and disappeared toward the break room like it was a bunker. I opened my Outlook and saw it, a calendar invite marked urgent. Realignment meeting initiated by Marla Vance, the new director who had been in the building for all of 72 days. We had spoken exactly 4 times. All of them felt like conversations with a shark who had just sniffed blood. By 10:17 a.m., I was in her glass-walled office, seated across from her and the HR rep, who wore a look of pre-installed regret. The words came out smooth and legal. "Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated in a strategic restructuring." Micro intrigue. What they didn't realize was that the export registration binder, the one that required my signature quarterly, was still sitting in my locked filing drawer. They hadn't even asked for it back. I didn't speak. I watched. Marla handed me the termination letter, her thumb tapping like a ticking clock. The HR rep mumbled something about transition support and severance. I nodded, signed, and stood. The whole scene took 11 minutes. That's how long it took to end 9 years, 7 audits, 3 BIS renewals, and 1 flawlessly clean record with the Department of Commerce. But it wasn't just my job they erased. It was the only legally registered export control officer the company had. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, staring at my badge and realizing they never asked me to return it. Strange for a strategic termination. Stranger still, my phone buzzed with a message from BIS contact log, automated notification. Routine export record request initiated, deadline 72 hours. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream. They had no idea what they'd just done. Micro intrigue, and I had no intention of warning them, because firing me was one thing, but pretending I never existed, that would cost them more than they could imagine. She thought I was invisible. But the system knew exactly where to find me, and who would pay for erasing me. The moment I left, the 9th floor started humming, not with activity, but with confusion. No one told the shipping team, no one updated the chain of command in the ERP, and definitely no one at the top realized that the trade suspension memo I had drafted months ago was no longer a hypothetical. At 9:34 the next morning, my former colleague James, the only person in that building with half a conscience, called me. He whispered like someone calling from a payphone in a spy movie. "Claire, they just tried to process an export to Taiwan and got a system freeze. No BIS flag clearance, compliance queues locked." I sipped my coffee, the first peaceful one I'd had in months. "Did they override it?" "They tried. It rerouted back to your credentials." "Which they deactivated yesterday." "Exactly. And now legal's calling IT." Micro intrigue. The company had built its international revenue stream like a house of cards, and I was the table they'd just kicked. By noon, the export registration portal pinged a hard error. 3 shipments flagged for compliance review, one marked high-risk technology, the kind that, if mishandled, could land a CEO in front of a federal hearing. And guess whose name still appeared in the system logs as the officer of record? Mine. At 3:12 p.m., I got an email to my personal inbox. Subject line, urgent. Clarification needed on export controls. No greeting, no signature, just a PDF of a shipping manifest, and a passive-aggressive note asking if I could clarify my latest update to the Commerce Department. I hadn't sent anything. Yet. Micro intrigue. They were scrambling to reassign responsibility, but the system wouldn't allow it. Not without my digital signature, not without my physical presence at the compliance recertification. And I was officially gone. That evening, I sat on my balcony, sunset reflecting off the skyline, while they tried to piece together a puzzle they didn't even realize I was holding the corners of. They fired the one person who could solve it, and left themselves locked out of their own game. The silence was beautiful. By the time they remembered my name, it was already listed in the system as the only authorized contact for federal review. And the countdown had begun. Want to know what happens when federal compliance meets corporate arrogance? Stick around, and don't forget to hit follow if this story has you on edge. The call came at 10:06 a.m., sharp, sterile, and 100% recorded. Ms. Lane, this is Raymond Nels from the Bureau of Industry and Security. You're still listed as the responsible officer for TechX Corp's export activity. We've received no authorized delegation file. Can you confirm your status with the company? I leaned back in my chair, the morning sun slicing across my living room floor in perfect geometric angles. I was terminated 2 days ago, I said calmly, without a transition protocol. So there's no assigned officer of record? Not legally. Silence, then a shift in tone. Thank you. That's helpful. Micro intrigue. When the Commerce Department uses the word helpful, someone's about to need a lawyer. Across town, panic was spreading like spilled toner. I imagined Marla pacing in her stiletto heels, snapping at assistants, trying to reverse engineer a compliance structure she never understood. The irony? She'd removed the only person who had kept the company's exports off the watch list. The BIS issued a soft hold within hours. Not public, not punitive, just visible. A scarlet asterisk in the export database. Every client with a global order now saw the same phrase, pending compliance verification. Micro intrigue, that single line was more destructive than a scandal. Distributors froze POs, Asian partners demanded clarification, and suddenly the company's quarterly forecast began to rot from the inside out. I got another message at 2:47 p.m., this time from the trade suspension memo system itself, the internal document Marla had once called overkill. RE, memo triggered, escalation level 2. Automatic hold on all shipments to controlled regions. Review in progress. Officer contact, Claire Lane. They had tried to delete my access, but they forgot one detail. I built the compliance protocols. I was the system. At 4:10 p.m., James texted me from the stairwell. Marla tried to sign off on a shipment. Portal rejected her. No officer override. She's losing it. Commerce is on the line right now. I think they're recording. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my old laptop, still synced to the cloud. I clicked on the dashboard and watched the red flags multiply. At exactly 6:03 p.m., the system logged its fourth denial of the day. A rejected shipment flagged EAR 99 potential violation. For those outside the trade world, that's not an error. That's a red light in a federal tunnel. Marla had no idea what that meant, but legal did. Micro intrigue. Somewhere inside the legal department, someone finally opened the BIS contact log I had maintained for 9 years. Neat. Time-stamped. Untouchable. And at the top of that log, my name. My federal ID. And the last note. Any officer replacement must be declared within 3 days of removal. Notify BIS immediately upon termination. No one had. That night, the Slack messages started leaking. James sent me screenshots. Why is her name still in the BIS portal? She was terminated. Doesn't matter. Systems still show her. Did anyone file a notice of change? What notice? By the time the finance team saw the cascading export delays, a mild frost had swept across the executive floor. But the real storm hit when TechX Corp's biggest international client, the one tied to a pending aerospace deal, issued a warning. Deliveries not cleared through BIS will result in immediate contract suspension. Micro intrigue. That deal alone was worth more than my entire 9-year salary, and it was about to evaporate over one eliminated position. I received a formal email the next morning from a new name in legal, someone I'd never spoken to. Ms. Lane, we respectfully request a brief consultation to clarify transition matters regarding your former compliance role. We are prepared to compensate you for your time. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to my contact at BIS with a single sentence. Company has not declared officer change. Multiple flagged shipments. No transition protocol submitted. They replied in under 10 minutes. Thank you. Opening review inquiry now. I closed the email, heart steady, not out of revenge, out of duty. They made me invisible. But federal records don't forget. The Federal Review wasn't loud. It never is. It started with a quiet request from the Bureau for TechX Corp's internal compliance training log, the kind of document only two people had access to, me and the head of IT compliance who left 6 months ago. By 11:22 a.m., their new interim export lead had emailed the wrong version of the log, an outdated PDF from 2022 with missing signatures and no acknowledgement of the updated dual-use regulations. Micro intrigue. That version still listed hardware components as low risk, a mistake that could tip the company into a Class 2 violation. And if Commerce noticed, let's just say pending would become prohibited. Meanwhile, James texted me again, one line. "They're talking about bringing you back." I didn't ask who they was, I knew. The same leadership team that called me excess capacity was now desperately scouring LinkedIn for a ghost, because I had become the ghost in their machine. At 3:15 p.m., I watched from a distance as their stock ticker took its first public dip in 2 quarters. A financial analyst blog had caught wind of the trade delay. The post was dry, technical, but deadly. Unconfirmed reports suggest a compliance disruption linked to export officer certification. No formal statement has been released. Micro intrigue. That post triggered an auto flag in one of their banking partners' risk engines. And just like that, their cash flow paused. Not from drama, from due diligence. I had never lifted a finger. By late evening, another email came through, this time from Marla herself. Subject: Officer of Record. Message: Claire, can we please speak directly? We may have misunderstood certain process steps and would appreciate your guidance. We're prepared to discuss terms. No apology, no ownership, just panic dressed up as diplomacy. I didn't reply, but I did open a folder on my desktop labeled Legacy Compliance for Audit. Inside was a copy of every system credential, every log update, every annual BIS declaration, and a voice memo from the day I trained Marla on export responsibilities. "This is above my pay grade," she had laughed. "Then don't fire the one person it's not," I had said. She didn't laugh that day, but I had recorded it anyway. At 8:42 a.m., the automated BIS system triggered its third escalation notice. Action required. TechX Corp remains non-compliant. Officer of Record unconfirmed. Pending audit risk elevated. The message went not just to the company, it was copied to their top 5 international vendors. Micro intrigue. It was no longer an internal fire. It was smoke rising from the roof, and everyone was watching. Marla tried to go into damage control mode, launching a flurry of emails labeled clarification and transition plan update. But every attempt ran into the same firewall, my name. She couldn't overwrite it. She couldn't erase it. And BIS doesn't take phone calls. Meanwhile, internal pressure mounted. Screenshots from James showed Slack messages getting more frantic by the hour. "Just assign someone else." "You can't. Her credentials are system locked." "Then call her back." "She's not answering." Micro intrigue. Then came the rumor that a commerce agent had requested recorded Zoom footage from the day of my dismissal. That meant someone tipped them off, and someone inside knew the whole thing was about to explode. And that someone wasn't me. I spent that day at the botanical garden, walking slow under the glass domes, sunlight filtering through leaves bigger than my head. It was peaceful, beautiful, unbothered. Somewhere across town, a boardroom full of executives was spinning, trying to recreate a paper trail they shredded in haste, trying to find the ghost they'd fired, not realizing she never left the system. Micro intrigue. Because you can fire a person, but not their fingerprints on federal records, not their digital certificate inside the export database, not the echoes they left in compliance metadata. That night, as the city blurred in dusk, I got one final message from James. "They just brought in outside counsel. I think they're prepping for a commerce audit." I smiled gently, because it was never about revenge. It was about record keeping, and I kept everything. The letter arrived by courier, thick, linen stock, no return address, signed in pen. "Dear Ms. Lane, we are formally requesting your cooperation as a consultant to ensure regulatory alignment with BIS expectations. You will be compensated at your standard hourly rate with a bonus upon successful reinstatement of export privileges. Please advise of your availability. Micro intrigue. They were offering me my own job back, but not as an employee, as a contractor, at triple the rate. I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I contacted a trade attorney I trusted. We went over every document, every BIS contact log entry, every lapse they had made. His reaction was silent for a moment. Then just one phrase. Claire, this isn't a comeback. This is liability mitigation, and you're the only rope they have left. Meanwhile, the federal clock kept ticking. Commerce hadn't forgotten. The audit had moved into phase 2, interview requests. 4 employees received formal inquiry notices. 2 of them were in legal. One was James. Micro intrigue. And the 4th? Marla. She had gone from commanding boardrooms to prepping with attorneys for a video call she couldn't cancel, a compliance briefing she couldn't bluff, and a timeline she couldn't rewrite. Because I had documented everything. At 4:13 p.m., my attorney sent them a reply on my behalf. Ms. Lane is willing to assist in a limited consulting capacity. Her cooperation is contingent upon full indemnification, non-rehire status, and acknowledgement of improper transition protocol in writing. Silence. Then a redlined agreement. Then a phone call. But I let my attorney handle it. I had no interest in being the hero. I was the ledger, and the ledger never lies. By Friday morning, the export portal showed its first sign of life in days. Officer of record, pending update. The system was in transition, but not because they had regained control, because I had lent them a lifeline. Micro intrigue. For one final hour, I logged in, reviewed the audit triggers, cleared the alerts I knew were bureaucratic noise, and flagged 2 discrepancies they hadn't even noticed. I wasn't helping them. I was protecting the record. Meanwhile, the trade suspension memo auto-updated. Status, partial clearance, review underway. Vendors exhaled. The stock stabilized. But inside the company, the mood was different. Marla was no longer visible on the directory. Her name vanished from the Slack channels. A quiet resignation? A strategic exit? Or just the system course-correcting? Micro intrigue. I didn't ask. I didn't care, because by then, the narrative had moved beyond her. Internal Affairs had quietly launched an investigation into HR's dismissal protocols, and multiple execs were suddenly on leave. As for me, I was done. I submitted my final invoice, archived the logs, and signed a document that read like poetry. Claire Lane has fulfilled her duties as officer of record. Her compliance guidance is hereby closed with full acknowledgement of service and process integrity. Not praise, not apology, just the truth, on paper, which is all I ever wanted. Because in the end, it wasn't my name they needed. It was the shadow of my compliance, traced across a decade of diligence. Weeks passed. The headlines faded, shipments resumed, audits closed, new officers were appointed. But quietly, under the surface, my presence remained. Because buried inside TechX Corp's new export policy under Section 9, Legacy Oversight, was a line no one outside legal would notice. Clause 9.7. Any future changes to the officer of record must include notification to prior record holders still archived within the system, per BIS guidelines. All prior officers must be preserved in compliance metadata. Micro intrigue. They wrote me into the policy, not with thanks, with obligation. I had become a permanent footnote, a legal fixture, not out of respect, out of fear. James texted me a photo of the internal rollout slide, Section 9.7, Lane Clause, internal only. It made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because they had tried to erase me and ended up naming a policy after me. I never returned to that building, never saw Marla again. But sometimes I'd catch wind of quiet rumors, new compliance hires being walked through the system Claire built, whispers of, don't override this setting unless you want commerce on your back. Micro intrigue. One afternoon, I received a message from a junior officer at another company. "Hi, Ms. Lane. I was trained using your documentation. Just wanted to say thank you. It saved us from a major flag today." That was enough. Not applause, not revenge, just knowing the system held. And the record remained. Because I was never looking for a spotlight, only for a job done right, even if no one remembered my name. But in the files that mattered most, they always would. 6 months later, while walking past a bookstore downtown, I spotted it. A new compliance handbook with a title I recognized: Modern Export Controls, Avoiding the Pitfalls of Poor Transitions. I flipped it open out of curiosity. Page 87. There it was, a full case study. Case: TechX Corp and the Officer of Record collapse. Summary: a mid-sized technology firm faced federal intervention after failing to execute a lawful transition of their export compliance officer. The result was a multi-week freeze, reputational damage, and the quiet removal of multiple executives. They never used my name, but every paragraph screamed it. Micro intrigue. The authors outlined what went wrong: poor HR protocol, zero succession planning, legal missteps, and the cardinal sin: underestimating institutional knowledge. I smiled. Not out of pride, but out of something deeper. The quiet, solid dignity of being right when no one listened. Later that evening, I received a letter from a law school professor. She was teaching a new ethics module using the Tech X Corp scenario. Would you consider guest lecturing on real-world compliance failure? Our students need to hear what happens when the paper trail is stronger than the people who ignored it. I paused, not because I hesitated, but because I realized something. They fired me, then hired me, then built policies around me, and now they were teaching me, all because I did my job too well to be erased. Because in systems built on silence and assumption, the one who documents becomes the last voice standing.